Hi guys, and welcome to part 5 of my series of videos that I'm doing on the Eagle Tree Vector Flight Controller and OSD. Now in part 4 we went through the basic OSD screen setup options, how to move things around on the grid system in the corner here, and also how to display various options, remove them, and what some of them do. In this part 5 video, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at the more advanced features of customization. So to do that, all you've got to do is click on the Advanced OSD Screen Setup, which will bring you into the field, and immediately you may well see that you've got a whole bunch of options greyed out. Now don't get too panicked about that. That is purely because at the moment my green box, if you look on the right hand screen here, at the top, my green box is empty. It's because I haven't actually selected an attribute to edit. If I click on, say, my main pack voltage, you will see that all of these attributes become available. Now, just clicking on the grey box to just make a quick point here, the main elements that we're going to be dealing with are in this section, this greyed out section. This is where you actually set the various states for all of your attributes. The attributes themselves are found on the left hand side on this submenu. You'll notice when you click on, say, camera voltage, that on the left hand menu it's under electrical and there is a slight grey tinge behind camera voltage. If you wanted to add one of these attributes from all of these little drop downs on the left hand side, you've simply just got to open them up and choose which one you want to have. So if I wanted to have my GPS course, I click on that and you'll see COU has been input onto the screen. I can choose where to put it. I can then click apply, and sure enough on the left hand screen you can see that COU 203 is currently showing. And that's literally how you do it. If you click on a load of these whilst you're looking through the options and you find out you've filled out your entire screen, all you've got to do is you just click on the attribute that you want to remove from the screen and you can press delete. The other thing that you're going to notice is depending on the type of attribute that you click on, some of these options may not actually become available, and that's purely because certain things, for example GPS course, there's no point in having an alarm on that, it's information only. So you may have a voltage that you need an alarm on, and some of those options are under this section. So if I click main pack voltage, they're there and available, but things like the plotting of the course is literally just information, so they're not available for us to have any alarm set to it. Okay, so with that in mind, let's take a look at main pack voltage as one example. So, concentrating on this side of the OSD display on the software, this is where we're going to set up how we want the actual attribute to display, whether it's numeric, whether it's done by a traffic light system, or whether it's done by a gauge. We can also tell it what colour scheme or at what point that colour scheme kicks in. So in other words, at what point your gauge is green, at what point it becomes yellow, at what point it becomes red. We can also decide whether we want an alarm to sound when it drops below a certain threshold, how often that alarm sounds if you're using the audio. We can say whether or not it speaks the units. We can do high and low alarms. And we can also put some text on some of the alarms, and that's pretty much the same for all the attributes on the actual vector. And again, it really depends on what the attribute is. If it has the ability of having a high and low state, you should be able to set an alarm against it. Just moving below the OSD on the right hand side here, you'll notice there is another section of options. Now this section of options is actually used to set up attributes based on the screen number that you're looking at. Now if you go over just below the false OSD here, you'll see vector screen 1. If I click these arrows, there's screen 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, and the vector has 6 available screens of grid systems that you can put these attributes in. The key is you can literally fill the thing with information coming from the vector and you can decide what's on there. What you will notice, however, is if I move to screen 2, that all my ladders, all my GPS, my compass, everything like that has disappeared. This is where you select those options on this lower panel here. So on screen 2, if I wanted to mimic screen 1, I can see that I've got an artificial horizon on screen 1, my center point's there, I've got my home point there, I've got my compass. So I'd have to go on to screen 2 and I'd say, okay, I would actually like to have my compass, I would like to have my flight mode indicator, I would like to have my altitude ladder on the right, my speed ladder on the left, and I'd like an artificial horizon, my home center point, which is the circle. And you can see I'm slowly building up a kind of a mimic. In fact, I haven't actually got the ladders on these two, so I would remove those. I would kind of building up the same screen. The point of having multiple screens is that there's a selection in the menu on display hardware where you dictate how many seconds between screen changes. So if you want to have huge amounts of information and you're flying a long way, then you can have it changing, say, every 5 seconds to look at new information. Then it will change again to screen 3, to 4, to 5, to 6, and however many screens you've got. If you've got nothing on screen 3, then it's only going to cycle through the screens that actually have relevant information. But that's pretty much how you fill all of those screens out using this lower section. So anyway, let's move back to what options we've got for the various attributes. Now on this screen you can see the first thing that we've got is we've got a drop down menu under choose display type, and we've got a screen name. We've also got a little tick box saying use icon for first character in name. Now the icon, as you can see on the right hand side here, at the moment is this little M in a battery state. That's now being used for the first character. So if I remove that, you'll notice that the icon removes from this little square here. It also removes from the OSD. If I click apply, you'll see on the left hand screen there's no longer the icon, there's just a P. If I just re-highlight it, now I could say VOL, and you'll see VOL is now displayed. Click apply and VOL is now displayed there. So you can actually put your own customization on it. So if you're more familiar with using Volt for your display, then you can just type it in. If not, you can use the default one and you can add some letters after it. Personally, I'm quite happy knowing that that is my main pack voltage and where it is. I'm going to click apply and that's done. This drop down menu here, this is where you display what type of display for each attribute there is. So at the moment you can see we've got numeric, that is to say we've got a voltage, it says 12.39. Our voltage can be displayed as either a numeric, it can be displayed as a numeric and a swatch is kind of like a traffic light system. So if I click on that, click apply, you'll see there is now a green square because we've got nice high voltage. If I wanted to adjust that, so it was a gauge, I would simply say gauge, apply, and you see we've got a full gauge with no numbers at all, or we can decide to have a swatch on its own, so just a traffic light system. Now the great thing with the Vector is that if you decide to use a swatch or a gauge, you can decide at what point the colours will change. So that is to say, for a voltage for example, we know that 12.6 on a 3S is the highest voltage that you can have. We also know that ideally you don't really want to drop much lower than say 10.6 volts. So what you really want to know is that there will be a point where your green will go down into say amber, and then after that it will go down into red. So you know that you've got a progression of your battery becoming lower. Now the Vector has actually got 5 available colours. So if I were to choose just gauge, we can see underneath that you've got gauge and swatch set up for main pack voltage. Number of colours selected is 5. Now on the Eagle Tree Vector, the number of colours are green, blue, yellow, magenta, which is purple, and red. So at the moment I've got 5 colours selected, so it's going to use all 5 of those colours in progression for the way that my battery goes down. To explain what that means a little bit further, fully charged will be green. When it drops a little bit lower, it'll go blue. When it drops even lower, it'll go yellow. When it drops down a little bit further, it's going to go purple, and then eventually when it's getting really bad, it's going to be red. Now how does it know what really bad is? Well, that's decided from the options down here and also from the options to the right of it. Now personally, I do not want to use 5 colours. I don't really like the idea of having blue and purple in my colour scheme. I like the good old-fashioned traffic light system. If I want to do that, that's no problem. All I've got to do is change this drop-down menu. Simply just a case of choosing 3 colours, so that is to say 3. And now that's going to give me the red, yellow and green traffic light system. Now it should be mentioned that these are set colours. You can't actually change the number of colours or anything like that. If you've got 5 colours, as I've said before, you've got green, blue, yellow, purple, red. If you choose 4 colours, you're going to have green, blue, yellow, red, but no purple. If you choose 3 colours, you're going to get green, yellow and red. And if you choose 2 colours, you're going to get green and red. So just bear that in mind. I'm going to say 3, Okay, so now below that we can see that there are a couple of percentages that we need to fill out. 0 is your worst value. Now at the moment it's showing 3.5. Now that would suggest that it's per cell. From the manual it states that actually you put the value in based on the type of numeric that there is. Now I know that my values on the numeric, if I change to numeric, will show 0.00. On the actual display on the left hand side it's showing 12.39. So what I need to do is, if I'm going to use a swatch or a gauge, I need to make sure that my lowest value is the lowest I'm accepting, which is going to be about 10.6 volts, and the best value is going to be 12.6 because that's the fully charged. I've then got the option of auto filling the thresholds, and that is to say at what point does green turn to yellow and what point does yellow turn to red, and they're on the right hand side here. If I click on auto thresholds, you'll see that these values basically take a medium from the two values you put in here. However, they are fully customizable, so I could decide actually I would like green to go from 12.6 to say 11.85. Hit enter to confirm, and then I would like to say I would like yellow to be there between 11.85 and about 11.1, because I know I can probably safely fly up to there. After 11.1 kicks in, it's then going to go into red because we are now between 11.1 and 10.6. And that is how you set up the traffic light system on the Vector. Completely customizable, and if you really want to have more colours and if you want to have more thresholds, you can just add those colours in and you can put the thresholds there. Bear in mind that these voltages will be used for alarms as well, so if you want to set these voltages as high and low, they're going to be set down here, not up here, but I'll touch on that in a moment. Okay, so we've covered the basics of setting the colour scheme for swatches and gauges. Now we'll just take a look at some of the additional features that you've got below. You can configure additional settings for main pack voltage. Now, we can have the voltage announced every and then a space here. Basically what this means is that if you have your Eagle Tree Vector with the little hub that comes with it for audio, you then link that to the audio output from your video transmitter. That will then send audio as well as video to your receiver, and assuming you've got the ability of then getting the audio from the receiver, you can then plug it into either a speaker or a set of headphones. Now I've got mine wired up at the moment, so I can actually hear the audio output through the speaker on my transmitter, my monitor. So I could actually say that I would like the voltage to be announced every 15 seconds. If I click on that and if I click apply, then what we're going to find out is in about 10 seconds time we should get told what the voltage for the pack is.
Pack voltage 12.33. Pack voltage 12.33.
There you go. So that is the little audio warning. That's the little generic chap who tells us what our pack voltage is. Now I've turned him off so he doesn't keep talking over us, but again you can actually state how many seconds between those warnings you get. Possibly quite useful. I probably won't be using it because out in the field it tends to be a case you can't hear it very well, but it's one of those things that it does mean that you don't have to concentrate on constantly looking at your OSD, and it does also give you the option of being able to not have some of these attributes showing on screen, so they don't get in the way. You just hear the voltage. You'll also see there's an option for speak units. I'll just give that a quick test out so you can hear the difference. So if I say announce value every 15 seconds and I would like to speak the units, I click on apply, and again in about 10 or 12 seconds time we should hear a recording.
Voltage 12.33 volts.
And there we go, you can hear he says volts on the end of it. Fairly straightforward, fairly obvious, but a nice little touch anyway. You can also say show the units. So if I click on that, you'll see on the false OSD on the right hand side, my main pack is now showing V. If I click apply on the left hand menu on the OSD, you'll see it's now got V on the side of it as well. Whether you choose to do that, up to you. You've then got show min stroke max for parameters after flight in the flight summary. Now this is the flight summary where once you've actually finish flying, once you've powered down your throttles, etc., it will know that you've kind of come to your home point and you're not moving anymore, and then you will actually receive a sort of an overview of the main attributes that you've got and where the highs and the lows were. So if you were measuring ground speed, for example, it could say, you know, your minimum was 0, your maximum ground speed was 100 miles an hour, and that would actually show up in your flight summary, and that's all driven from this little tick box here. Okay, so for the time being, I'm going to remove the units and showing the min and max, and I'm going to click apply, and let's move down to the section below it. So now we've got to the configure alarms for main pack voltage. So this is where you can actually configure alarms for a high and low state. So we've already got the gauges set up, but all that's doing is giving us an actual reference. These alarms will actually start flashing those gauges when you get to a certain point, which of course you then can customize, and you can decide at what point you have that flash up. So let's say, for example, on the main pack voltage, high alarm enabled isn't really relevant because, let's face it, batteries don't charge themselves and get high when you're actually in the air. What would be useful is maybe a low alarm, just in case you forgot to look at your gauge or your numerics. So let's just say we wanted a low alarm enabled. Then you've got to set a number for it. So I would say I would like to know when I go under, say, 10.9 volts. You choose that and you click enter. Now just be aware that sometimes when you commit a field, it doesn't do it the first time. And if it doesn't, just go back to it and redo it. So this is to say that I should now get a low alarm when I hit 10.9 volts. Now what's that going to do? At the moment, because I haven't got the audio alarm set up, and a lot of people aren't going to have audio alarms set up, at the moment all that's going to do is when it hits 10.9 is it should flash the attribute in the top left hand corner of the screen as we've got it set up. So that should start flashing away, basically saying you have hit your low alarm. What you can also do is you can choose to have some special text, so you can actually say 10.9 volts warning, and that will actually flash up on the screen when you hit that voltage warning. Now unfortunately, because I'm in USB mode, I can't demonstrate that for you, but that is the idea, is that you can actually set some custom alarms. Now the other thing to bear in mind, which is used from the little tick box above, is that if you've got multiple screens, let's say you've gone crazy and you've got 6 screens of information that's rotating every 5 seconds, if you've got on your 5th screen and all of a sudden you've come down to your low voltage because you've given the throttle a bit of a boost, what you're going to want to know is that alarm's gone off, and you don't really want to have to wait until your other screens have finished. So by choosing the switch to this readout screen when alarm triggered, what it's going to do is it's going to say, oh, screen number 1 has a warning on it, I need to display that now. Obviously if you've got your particular attribute with an alarm on it and it's on screen 3, then it's going to say, oh, I need to switch to screen 3 and I need to display that warning. And also, of course, you have the speak alarm option. Now that is to say that just like the announce the value every time, you can actually have a little voice that says alarm, alarm, low main pack voltage, and it will actually announce that so you can be aware. That's quite a nice feature if you've got lots of attributes, because sometimes you're not going to notice the flashing. You might have a bit of flicker on your VTX if you're going a long way away. So it's not a bad thing to have your audio as a backup from that, but just make sure that you've got it loud enough that you can actually hear it when you're actually in the field. Okay, so that's most of the points of the advanced OSD screen setup all done. Basically, we should now be at a point where you can select the attributes that you want to see, you can position them on your OSD in the place that you want to see them, you can choose whether or not you want them on one screen or whether you want them spread across a number of different screens, whether it's in large font, small font, and you can also set up your gauges and your swatches so you get the warning that you want in the colours that are recognisable. The most important part of all of this is making sure that you understand what's going on the screen itself. If you have any questions about any of the attributes on the left hand side here, and as you can see there are tons of them, the best thing to do, first and foremost, head to the manual. There's a brief overview of each point on there. If you have further questions on how it works, or if there's any issues or glitches, and I have noticed a few of them myself, then the best thing to do is go onto the forums, or failing that, post a question in the comments of this video and I'll try and seek out the answers and give you an answer as quick as I can. Other than that, there's not really much we need to touch on the advanced OSD screen setup anymore. What we'll now do is we'll head over to the display hardware settings and we can take a look at what's going on there. Okay, so when we come into the display hardware settings, we can see the first thing we've got is a drop-down menu, which is Show Post-Flight Summary. Now, Post-Flight Summary, as I've talked about a couple of times before, what this is when you finish with the flight and you land, the Vector will detect that you're at the home point if you landed, and you will then see a display of all of the attributes, kind of minimum, maximum of what you've done. If you've got a DVR, it's really good because it will record that and you'll be able to look at it again. But don't forget, you've also got data logging enabled inside the Vector, and that means that you've got huge amounts of information. And again, I will look to do another video potentially in the future just showing you some of the data logging that's there. Other options below, we've got cycle to next OSD screen every 2 seconds set at the moment. Obviously, if you've got more than one screen, what that's going to do is it's going to cycle between those screens every 2 seconds. If you want to take it to 10 seconds and have a nice big amount of time to read the information, you just do the slider and you click apply, and then that will then mean that every 10 seconds it's going to do the swap. Unfortunately, I can't demonstrate that at the moment because with USB enabled, it doesn't seem to switch between more than one screen. Set horizontal screen shift. What this means is that if you find your OSD is slipping slightly off the side of your display, you can move it left and right on screen. What I'll do is just demonstrate. On the left hand menu, you can see if I move it to the left all the way, the numbers jump all the way to the left of the screen. If I move it to the right slightly, they move into the right. There is a maximum limit. If I go to say 30, it will only go so far. If I go all the way, it's stopped moving now. So you just have to play around with that, get it to the point where you're comfortable with where it sits on your screen and that it's all displaying in a place that you want. Likewise, you can do that for the vertical. This is probably more pertinent to people. I'm moving this on my live display. I can't actually see the voltage anymore in the top left hand corner. However, if I move it to the right, I can drop it down and it will appear in the letterbox. Set OSD text white level. This is something where if you set an attribute as white, this will control how bright that white is. Set OSD black level. Again, that will set the level of black. If we move that down slightly, then you can see on my display, and I don't know whether it's actually recording right, but actually that's causing a glitch and it's actually gone grey bars. I'm going to move it up one more, slightly better, move it up to 2, and now black is as black should be. And if I move it one more to 3, I actually get a much burnt out white on everything. So I'm going to keep it as default, and I suggest as long as it's working for you, that's what you should do. Underneath we've got some little trigger points. Now we've got defaulted on turn on OSD on alarm trigger. What that is if you have a mode switch set to actually remove the on-screen display, which you can do as I looked at in my first videos. What this means is that if you set one of the custom alarms, if you've got that on, so you're literally just looking out the camera and one of those alarms triggers, what it will do is it will automatically turn on the OSD and it will show you the screen that the alarm is being triggered on. Quite nice if you're doing long range flight and you like to have full view from your camera without having anything else on the screen, just on the knowledge that if there is a low voltage alarm, say, that kicks in, that your on-screen display will turn up and it will be there for you to look at. Narrow screen mode, all this is if you've got a display that is slightly wider than some and you find that it's not displaying properly, you can actually click on narrow screen and it will bring the OSD down. It's more for people who have got 4:3 displays rather than 16:9 widescreen displays, and it will just pull the lettering in. I'll just give it a try, and yeah, you can see if I actually toggle that live, it's just squashing it down slightly, making it a little bit more apparent, as you can see with the gauge on the right hand side. It's not filling the screen out. Now this setting here, display on/off with toggle mode, this is glitching for me at the moment. The idea behind this is actually quite a nice one. It means that if it was ticked on, that you would be able to single throw your mode switch, so just one up down, and that would actually turn off your display, your OSD, and then one up down would then turn it back on. Now I've been playing around with this, and certainly in on-screen display mode with the USB plugged in, it does not work very well. I turned it on and all of a sudden everything disappeared. I toggled it once, it came back, but then it would turn off every 2 seconds. It seemed to get itself into a bit of a weird cycle with the 2-second display here. I am currently on firmware version 11.48, and obviously if there is an update and that changes and it's worthy of looking at, I'll try and do an update video. Now underneath this we then move on to the color configuration. So this is the text and graphic color choices. So graphic objects color at the moment is green. Let's say I move that to red, you will see that my artificial horizon has changed to red. So this is where you can actually decide what to have it on. If I select that as being white, I believe what should now happen is I can now change the intensity of the white that is being displayed. So if I move that down to 0, you'll see that now is actually black and slightly grey, and fully white is 7. Now I'm going to leave that at about 5, but that is only relevant if you change any of these to white. So I actually quite like the green, so I'm going to leave it as that. Graphics objects highlight, so you can see there is a slight drop shadow on some of these. If I change that to red, you will see behind the gauge in the top right hand corner, for example, that now has a red background. Black gives you the little stroke line around it, blue, and it's really just a case of choosing which you prefer. Personally, I think black is going to be the way forward, certainly on a bright day. Numeric parameter highlight, again that's the stroke colour around it. At the moment it's on black, so that's all fine for me. However, if I wanted to make it a little bit more prominent, I could say I would like to have yellow with a red foreground. Not particularly readable, so maybe I'll go back to black, and that will now change it to red. So this is basically just changing around the colour scheme to a point where you're happy with it. I'm going to leave it with white and black because I think with the bars that's going to be good. Of course, if you didn't have the bars there, if you didn't have the letterboxing and that was just full screen, you might find that you would want something like red because it stands out from the green of the ground or the blue of the sky, for example. Title message, text color, title message, text highlight, same thing there. At the moment we've got it as green and black. That is to say that if you reboot the Vector, you'll see that the green and black is shown. Colour intensity, there's a high and low on this. So at the moment we've got green as high. If you look at the bar on the top right hand corner and I put that to low, you'll see it slightly dulls out. Put it back to high and it's much more vibrant. Same thing applies to all of these. And at the bottom you've got a hue value which you can change. So this is the hue for all of the various colours. So green and magenta hue, yellow and blue, and you've then got the colour brightness. So if I wanted to change the hue of the green, we've got a few green things here. As you can see, the more I move that up, the more white that becomes. Further down I go, the paler it gets. So somewhere in the middle is absolutely fine for me. Colour brightness. If I take the colour brightness all the way down, you'll see that all of those vibrant greens are now much duller. So it's really just a case of finding where you're happy with to get those greens and those colours as bright as you want. And once you're happy with it, then you are all set to go. So that's pretty much all of those attributes looked at. The one attribute I haven't touched on, which I did in an earlier video, is the reverse colour for PAL cameras. If you're running a PAL GoPro or a GoPro in PAL mode or a Mobius in PAL mode, then potentially this will be defaulted to on. Now, as you can see, if I flip it now, all of a sudden green has turned to purple. If I turn it off, purple has turned to green. So just be aware of that. Personally, I don't like having that option on there. I'm always going to be using a PAL camera. I would like my greens to be green all the time. I don't really need to be reminded that I'm in a different PAL mode. All of my setup at the moment has an automatic detection, so it detects it and it will display it on my screen based on what it's got. I think I will just turn my greens up a little bit brighter. And there we go. So that is the display hardware settings all covered. Now the one thing that I haven't mentioned, of course, are the buttons all the way on the bottom of the screen here. if you're happy with your setup and you've got all of your attributes, your OSD is all fine, you're happy with your alarms, obviously you don't want to get to a stage where you lose all of this if you have a major problem, and all you need to do there is click on the save configuration, and it'll ask you to save it as a text file. And what that does is it just saves all of those parameters as a text file, and then if you did a reboot, a firmware update, or a factory reset, you can then reload those settings and it will bring in all of those parameters for you. So that's pretty much the advanced side of the Vector OSD covered. Like I say, if there's any questions, please post a comment, and then I will come back with some more videos later, hopefully getting the thing in the air, and then I can talk a little bit about the data logging as well.